Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is the raising of Chattanooga. Yes, I'm serious. After doing my two recent videos about Seattle and Chicago, in which I talked about the Seattle Underground and the raising of buildings in Chicago, supposedly, and in both of these cases, the streets were also said to have been raised. And yeah, the stories are extremely fishy and pretty nonsensical and quite ridiculous. So if you haven't watched those videos, I recommend that you do, because what they try to pass off as history on Wikipedia and on other places, on other sites, is they must think that we're really stupid. So I decided that going along that route, I would look up other cities where the streets had supposedly been raised. And that is where I came across Chattanooga. Now, there is something different about Chattanooga, and I will share that with you in a minute as I'm reading this, because this is very interesting if you compare it to the stories behind Seattle and Chicago. So again, I'm going from Wikipedia because that's where the narrative comes from. And there are some really, really intriguing things in this article, and it's not very long. But it says underground Chattanooga is a below ground area of Chattanooga, Tennessee, that resulted from citizen efforts to prevent floods in the aftermath of the flood of 1867. It was rediscovered by Jeff Brown in the 1970s. So apparently they forgot about it? I don't know. One of the themes that you will find running through these underground stories or raising the street stories or even the ridiculous raising the building stories, there will always be fires involved or floods or swampy grounds. So just keep that in mind. And here we already have flooding. So let's just read what it says here. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, Chattanooga experienced bouts of systematic flooding roughly every decade. The impact of flooding was severe. It affected many of Chattanooga's manufacturers as well as the merchants in the area. Building damage was frequent, as well as the interruption of daily life. Chattanooga's commerce was constantly affected by the flooding. After years of suffering through flooding, in March 1867, Chattanooga experienced a record flood following 4 days of heavy rainfall. The river had risen 53 feet, which was 15 and a half feet higher than a flood 20 years earlier. The rain lasted for 4 days, bringing the water level in the Tennessee River 28 feet above flood range. The bridge across the river was destroyed, as were many buildings. There was a considerable loss of life and looting took place. Upwards of 4,000 homeless in Chattanooga were ferried out of the flooding city to areas of higher ground. During a 64-year span ranging from 1875 to 1938, the Tennessee River had risen above its flood range more than 70 times. The concept of adding levees were briefly discussed among the residents of Chattanooga. However, the waterfront areas were deemed too valuable as a commercial resource to use for the construction of a levee. After the bouts of flooding, a local newspaper article was released that stated the city's leaders planned on raising the grade of the streets of Chattanooga so that they would no longer flood. The people of Chattanooga began to raise the level of a few of the city's streets by 3 to 15 feet. So I'm going to stop there, because let's not forget that they have to fill in these streets. Okay? So once they're raising them, they need to put something there, especially to raise it 15 feet. Where are they getting this material from? How are they transporting it there? And let's not forget that most of the streets at this time were dirt roads. So to be hauling all of this material for a few of the city streets to raise them by 3 to 15 feet already sounds a bit unbelievable. And again, it says a few of the city streets. That's when they began. But it became, oh my gosh, I can't talk, 40 blocks of downtown Chattanooga was raised. So it started out as just a few of the city streets, but it ended up being 40 blocks, okay? Being raised 3 to 15 feet in the 19th century when it was horse and buggies and dirt roads. And again, where did all this material come from? Market and Broad streets were completely filled, as well as portions of Cherry and Chestnut streets. The method in which the city was raised is disputed because there is no historical documentation. That is very interesting because what we got from the Chicago and the Seattle stories were very detailed stories about how these street levels were raised. They were ridiculous. In we're supposed to believe that in Chicago, as they were raising buildings that were blocks long, supposedly 600 men using 6,000 jack screws to lift a building while people are inside shopping and having tea. That's what we're supposed to believe, okay? This one at least says that the way that it was raised is disputed because there is no historical documentation. So they do point that out here, which is surprising in my opinion. Anyway, it was speculated that what was used in the raising was dirt from higher level areas of the town. Later, available records and soil boring showed that a variety of different materials, such as foundry waste and sawmill scraps, had been used in raising the city's streets. In 1933, okay, this is interesting for those of you who understand the symbolism behind the number 33 and how the Freemasons love to use the number 33 in their tales. And yes, there are many people who believe that these narratives that we're being fed all have a common theme and a common root. And many people believe that it does have something to do with the Freemasons and just the false history that we've been given. So you have to look for little clues in these Wikipedia articles and again in other articles because the entire historical narrative is threaded through everything. Once you learn to find the clues, though, they just pop out at you. So right here, in 1933, the Tennessee Valley Authority, in conjunction with Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, helped pass the Tennessee Valley Authority Act, also in 1933, which prompted the construction of the Chickamauga Dam. After the dam was built in 1933, it helped to regulate the water levels of the Tennessee River near Chattanooga, preventing downtown from flooding. Because of a lack of historical documentation backing up the raising of the city's streets, some suggest that it is just a legend. Some suggest that it was a common practice for the basements in buildings downtown to have stairs leading down from the street. These walk-downs, some complete with handrails leading down towards a basement entrance, existed in downtown Chattanooga at the time. The basements had windows to provide light as well as ventilation. There has been some photo documentation of structures over a span of 30 years that show little or no change. An explanation for the archways in some buildings could be explained by being used as support for the building. Some suggest that the only evidence is that of a normal growing city infrastructure and no monumental effort to raise the city's streets. After 1925, the use of commercial basements began to fade. Over time, parts of the city began to be filled in that fell below grade. So this highlights that what I will often get just in my comment section. This is completely normal. These buildings were not buried. These buildings are not underground. That's just how they built things. And that's what this is saying that some people are trying to say happened here as well. Now, I'm going to see if it says anything. Oh, it does say about the discovery because it kind of skipped over that. So I want to go back and just see what it says here. Archaeologist and University of Tennessee Chattanooga professor Jeff Brown started noticing small clues to the underground world while walking around downtown Chattanooga. If you hear the squeaking, it's my guinea pigs. Anyway, it's always my cats or my guinea pigs. Anyway, he learned from utility workers of doorways leading to tunnels and rooms or nowhere altogether. Entire basements of buildings were once first floors, including some obvious storefronts, complete with windows. None were marked on maps, and no one could tell him why these features were there. He discovered that much of the city had been backfilled by 6 feet at 9th Street and up to 20 feet at other places, but very little documentation of this process existed. So again, the question just becomes, is this just another story that was kind of put in place to hide what he found? What was basically an entire group of buildings and storefronts that is now underground. And again, they say that it was because of the street levels being raised, but there are many people who will ask, or is it possible that it could have happened from something like a mud flood? I also found this interesting article here that I wanted to share with you, not the whole thing. And I wanted to show you some pictures and then compare them to some pictures from my town and towns around me that I have taken pictures of. So this is from the onlyinyourstate.com website. And it says Chattanooga is the fourth largest city in Tennessee, and it was incorporated in 1839. Though its history runs deep in the nation, Chattanooga is also home to one of the most unsettling legends in the state, underground Chattanooga. So it's interesting here that in Chattanooga, the underground, which is clearly there, you can see it. I believe you can even take tours of it. It is there, but it is still considered to be a legend. And I think the reason that it's considered a legend there is because there is no confirmed narrative of how it got there, why it got there. So I think that's how it reached legendary status in comparison to underground Seattle. Early in Chattanooga city tenure, the town was flooded nearly every decade. The flooding was severe, and many businesses and manufacturing plants experienced record losses. The worst flood in the area's history was in 1867, just after the Civil War, when 4 days of rainfall caused the river to rise a whopping 53 feet. The bridge across the Tennessee River was completely destroyed, and 4,000 people had to be ferried out of the flooding area. In fact, from 1875 to 1938, the river rose above its flood range over 70 times. The people of Chattanooga realized that to continue living in their city, something had to be done, and quickly. Although levees were discussed, like Chattanooga's southern neighbor, New Orleans, the waterfront was considered much too important for commercial imports to impede. The legend goes that the leaders of the city rallied to raise the grade of the streets, which means that potentially 40 blocks of Chattanooga's downtown had to abandon first floors to basements and fill in portions of the street. So not only were they filling up 40 blocks of street, anywhere from now that says up to 20 feet, so we'll say from 3 feet to 20 feet, 40 blocks, filling these streets, and then on top of that, these building owners also had to lose the entire first floor of their building. And here are just some photos here showing this. The history of the matter is disputed, mainly because the only evidence of underground Chattanooga is sparse. A single newspaper article is the basis for a majority of the tales. Then, of course, there are a few eerie finds in the city's basements. And this is something that I see all the time as I am out walking. And I went through my photos that I took, and I was able to find some similar to this, but none exactly like this. I do know that I have photos like this, but they're probably on my phone and not my computer. But what I'm going to share with you from my own town that has no history of the streets or sidewalks being raised, okay? You will see the same thing. So right here, I took this in a building in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. No stories about the street levels being raised there. No stories about sidewalks being raised. None of the kind. But what you will see is a similarity, yet some of the window is sticking up. However, you see that archway, and it is definitely below street level. And if you compare it to the window above it, it is the same size. It has the same arch. It clearly was once just a regular window like that. And again, very, very similar to what I just showed you. It's just that in this case, some of the window is showing. This is also a picture of a building in Bethlehem. And I did share this, I think, on my last video or the one before. I've actually shared it on a couple videos because I think this picture just says it all. But as you can see here, there are some windows that clearly look like the windows above them that are now below street level. And not just a level street level, but a slanted street level. This is a photo that I took of a building in my own town. And in this one, you can see that the glass of the window is flush with the sidewalk. And yeah, this is one that I have shared in several videos. And I know a lot of you will ask, well, why didn't you share landscape photos? Because when I was taking the photos, I was taking them for Instagram. I wasn't taking them for YouTube. So I was holding my phone vertically. That's why they're like this. But the whole way that you walk down the side of this building here, you will see these covered up, boarded up windows that are definitely below street level. I just took a picture of this one in particular, though, because this is the one that so clearly shows that the glass is right up against the sidewalk. And I'm sorry, you cannot tell me that they built the building like that. Here's an example of the buildings that they were talking about in the Wikipedia article, where the people are saying, oh no, they always used to build their doors underground and have steps going up to the street. So this is, again, from my town, and this is an example of one of those doors that is underground, and this is the handrail here, and they have to go up the steps to get onto the sidewalk. And I shared lots of photos from Allentown that I took in my last video, and so you can go take a look at those. Lots of the same underground doors with the steps going up there too. And to me, that just would be nonsensical to dig out a portion of the sidewalk just to have an entrance there. It seems far more likely that something happened that was the original front door and then it was covered. Okay, right here, I did find this old thumbnail. So I did do a video in which I showed more of these photos from my town. And so this is in a horizontal photo, so you can see more of it in this one. So I just thought that I would share that with you here. Also, this, again, from my town, you see this arch here. And what you can't see above this is that there was a huge window that was shaped exactly like this. This building has very, very long windows. And I think that it's like a 3 or 4 story building. And what you see here, I think used to be another window. And a part of it was covered up from the bottom. It was made short and they made it into a little doorway. And so I don't know if they used that to like shovel coal into for the heating after all of this happened, but I do think that it started out as a window, because this was not the only one. This was all of the windows in this building were just lined up, one window on top of another, and then the whole lower level of this building is just little openings like this. So I don't think they would have needed that many openings for coal chutes. Now, an interesting thing that you will also see in some buildings, and this is from Moravian College in Bethlehem, is that this is the front door, right? But there is a door under the front door behind the stairs. And you will actually see a lot of buildings like that as well. And if you look at the side of the building, which again, you couldn't see because I was taking these photos for Instagram, the windows that are level with this doorway, it's a hill. So they're all buried, and now while this door would be completely open for you to just walk right into, the windows on the side there, since there's a hill, they're buried too. And I think that's why they originally just made that go up the steps so that the whole quote first floor would now be level and not half buried. At least that's my opinion. Okay, so again, we are back to the photo in this article showing that arch. If I can find my photos on my phone, I will share them on my community page, because I do. There are so many buildings around here that show this very thing. Here you can see the arches of a window that was potentially covered up. There are a few locations in the city, mainly between Market and Cherry Streets, where you will find covered windows and retaining walls built to submerge the first level of the building into the basement area. Underground Chattanooga seems to have been a project, if an intimate one, and it did not stretch throughout the entire city. You will find, however, doors leading to tunnels and rooms with nowhere to go. Some entire basements appear to have been first floors, including a few that had storefront windows boarded or bricked up. Now, when you talk about the doors leading to tunnels, that is also found in my town. I have read, and I've actually shared them on other videos with me here. There are historical articles written about my town, and it does talk about that there are people who say that the houses that they were living in had doors that opened into what we're told are the slate tunnels. So very many similarities between these stories. But again, my town and the other towns' photos that I showed you, no stories at all of the streets being raised. So here you can see what was once a stairway, perhaps a grand stairway from the first floor to the second. Now it has been completely forgotten in a private Chattanooga basement. Peeling wallpaper adds an extra element of creep. Some folks even say that some residents of Chattanooga chose to live in the dark once their first floors were darkened and built over. How eerie is that? None of the city's underground can be found on a map of Chattanooga, though the process of backfilling certain areas of the town can be confirmed due to small hints and clues. Some believe that the city was raised up to 20 feet, burying whatever and whoever was below. Sounds rather ominous and certainly sounds like something that could happen during some sort of a mud flood, doesn't it? And yeah, so it just says, yeah, it's just ending it. What an eerie story. Did you have any idea? Although there is quite a bit of controversy regarding the city's underground, it makes for a neat legend. Yeah, a neat legend along with the rest of them that we're just trying to figure out exactly what happened. We know that we're not being told the truth simply because there are so many similarities between these towns and these cities. You see the exact same thing in building after building after building, and we keep hearing different stories for some, and then in others you will hear absolutely nothing, but you will still see evidence of what other towns claim are their evidence for the raising of streets. So the whole thing is just, it's just a lot to think about. Anyway, that's all that I had for you today. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.